Story 1. I'm 29 male, visiting my family with my wife, 28 female, married for a few weeks, and my sister, 13 female, is acting jealous and distant to her. I'm visiting my family for a little over a week after our honeymoon. My wife and I live abroad, and my sister is being weird as hell. We've been staying at my parents' for 3 days, and my sister has thrown these little childish jabs at my wife the whole time. Example, yesterday. My sister and I were cooking. We were cutting vegetables, and my wife asked if we needed help. My sister then said, "No, we are fine," in Spanish, so my wife wouldn't understand it. My wife speaks English. Everyone in the house can speak English, but my sister said that particular thing in Spanish just for my wife to not understand it. I told my sister something like, "Can you chill?" while laughing. I didn't scold her, and told my wife how she could help us. There have been other little comments like that, but you get the gist of it. Neither my sister nor my parents have ever met my wife in person, so this is literally my wife's first impression of my sister. Last night, I explained to my wife what happened, and she laughed and said she was also a jealous tween/teen once when her sister was starting to date for the first time, and my wife hated her boyfriend just for dating the sister. How to tell my sister to chill in the best way? What would be the best way to approach that talk? I mean, give her time. It's the first time that they're meeting your now wife. Like, yeah, she's 13. You're like a significantly older brother, so she probably looks up to you a lot and really cherishes your relationship and views your wife as someone who's kind of taking you away from her. And if you have never brought your wife over before marrying her to meet them, yeah, that's gonna feel like someone who's stealing you away to a degree. So just give her time. Like, this does not seem like that big of an issue. I think, she'll need some time to get to, warm up or whatever, visit more, and if she just gets to know your wife, then I'm sure she will learn to appreciate her if they get along, and if they don't, that's how people are. I don't know what to tell you. Story 2. My father blames my sister for my mother's death, and now that she calls me daddy, he regrets. I, 24 male, am the older brother to my little sibling, 5 female. I was always the one who had to take care of my sister. For the sake of privacy, I'll call her Belle. For some background, my parents had me as teenagers. They were 15 and 16 at the time, and even as a kid, I could always feel that they regretted having me. After I was born, both my mother and father were practically disowned by their family. My mother had to drop out of high school to take care of me, while my father worked 2 jobs just to provide, and even then they couldn't afford a home. They lived with my mother's older sister until I was 9, and my father got his GED and managed to get a better job and move us out. Despite the fact that our living situation was better, it was clear to me that they believed their lives were ruined because of me. Whenever I misbehaved like any normal child, they'd use the fact that they gave up their lives for me, and I still had the audacity to behave like this. And even when I never misbehaved, they never treated me with much love. I barely got to get new clothing. They'd get my clothes from Goodwill and practically refused to get me anything nice unless they had to. Birthdays, parties, meeting friends, and their wedding. My birthdays were always celebrated with the bare minimum. They'd get me a cupcake and a single gift, nothing that I wanted. Despite everything, I was still the child who just wanted their love. But as I grew older, I began to accept I wouldn't get it and made peace with that. I guess somewhere along the line, when my parents realized I gave up on them, as throughout my teen years they, mainly my mother, began to treat me better. But at that point, I wasn't the child who begged for their love anymore. I never received the love of my parents, and I wasn't asking for it anymore. Although I can't say I kept hating them, in fact my feelings began to feel neutral towards them. In my eyes, we were practically strangers. I never got to know them truly as they raised me with the bare minimum and never had any real conversations with me and never spent any quality time with me. They also knew nothing about me, so suddenly trying to play parents with me was awkward to say the least. When I was 18, my mother got pregnant, and I guess that was when they gave up on trying to fix things with me as they could have a new child to start over with. They didn't treat me poorly again, but instead it felt like we were strangers living in the same home. When I turned 19, my mother gave birth to a girl, but due to some complications, she didn't end up surviving. This crushed my father. Not only did he begin to resent me for not being as sad as he was over her death, she was barely a mother for me to begin, so there wasn't much to be sad over, but he also blamed his daughter for killing his wife. He was never home after the incident, and I was left taking care of my sister. I ended up having to take a break from college after the time I came home from my classes to my sister screaming with hunger in an unchanged diaper while my father was out drinking. I took care of Belle full-time and called out my father multiple times, but he always got angry and ended the convo with him saying I could always leave Belle at the fire station. I eventually gave up on forcing him to be a father. Despite everything, I truly loved Belle. She was the sweetest and cutest kid. She was almost always smiley and surprisingly slept through the night. Once she was old enough, I enrolled her in daycare and continued my education while working night shifts. I always made sure to leave a good portion of afternoons empty so I could spend time with her. She always knew who her actual father was, and as she grew older, she began to try and spend time with him, I guess as she began to follow him around the house. Of course, that quickly ended after he blew up on her and she began to fear him. I realized she saw me as a paternal figure despite the fact she knew I was her brother. When she was old enough for preschool, I found out she was telling people I was her father. I never mentioned it to her, just let it be until she gave her Father's Day card she made in preschool to me. I told her if she wanted, she could call me Dad, and since then she's been calling me Daddy. My father ended up getting a girlfriend and began to change himself as he stopped drinking, got a better job, and even began to take over a majority of the bills other than the portion I agreed to pay to stay living here. He never really tried being a father to Belle. He did begin to eat breakfast with us, but that breakfast was spent in silence other than me and Belle talking. Fast forward to a few months ago on Belle's birthday, I had planned a party for her and invited her to preschool class. My father ended up attending as I guess his girlfriend thought it would be a good time to meet his daughter, as she was the one who looked excited to be here. Anyway, while she was opening gifts, I surprised her with one of those kids' electric cars. She screamed and hugged me, yelling how she loved me and called me Daddy. After the party and after Belle was fast asleep, my father asked me what the hell happened. I was confused till he yelled asking why his daughter was calling me Daddy. I asked him if he seriously didn't know why and told him that I was the one who raised her. I bought her everything. I celebrated her firsts. I was the one who didn't abandon her. He was quiet and went to bed. Since then, he's tried to play father and talk to her, but he was a stranger to her. She was a sweet girl, so she entertained my father's conversations, but he could tell how awkward she felt, and it was clear it hurt him. Despite how selfish it is, I don't want their relationship to get better. After all, just as she saw me as her dad, I saw her as my daughter. I graduated college and I'm looking for a better job so I can move Belle and I into our own home. I may be a bad person for enjoying my father's misery and regret realizing he ruined his chances in having a relationship with his daughter, but I'll never be as bad as him. Yeah, I'm sorry, but Belle's biological father isn't her father. You are her father now. She looks to you as a paternal figure. You've been doing the fatherly thing. You're her father, just as an adopted father would be her father. And the biological father ruined his chances. Like, I've got some sympathy for him, first being a teenager, trying to raise a child, though, seriously, teens, when you get this and you decide to just ruin your lives to raise this child, if you want the child to live and you don't want an abortion, that's fine. That's your choice. But give the kids up for adoption. There are so many great people out there looking to adopt kids who can give that kid the life you want to give them and make sure that they're happy instead of just being miserable to the person who wrote this post. And don't do that, okay? But then to blame your child on the death of your wife, no, absolutely not. That child did not intentionally kill your wife, and then to treat her like that for 5 years, and suddenly you get a girlfriend, your life is starting to look up, and you're like, I want a relationship with this kid, and hey, if my girlfriend dumps me and I go back into a slump and treat you like crap, that's just life, kid. Nope. Seriously, to the person who wrote this post, I hope you can get Belle out of there, officially adopt her, become her guardian, whatever, and just keep her away from what is a toxic person who needs to do a lot of work on himself before he can even think of trying to act like a father. Story 3. Yet another new manager facing the consequences of their actions. I'll keep the details as vague as possible because I'm still with this organization. I work for a government department. We have offices and locations all over the state. I'm based out of a city that's about 2.5-hour train ride to our head office. At the time, I was working in a team that had members working remotely all across the state, looking after policy, process, and quality assurance. Our old manager had gone and gotten himself promoted for being genuinely brilliant at his role. So our new manager, Steve, was hired in from the glorious world of banking. He was here to help whip us lazy public servants into shape. A few days after he began his role, he called us all into a teleconference to inform us he wanted all of us to be at the head office 8 a.m. tomorrow morning for an all-day in-person team meeting. He wanted to see us in meat space to size us up, understanding what we were doing and see where we weren't keeping up with the private sector. As I mentioned, due to the nature of the work we were doing, we were all across the state, so in-person whole team meetings were rare, and if they occurred at all, they were booked weeks in advance. We were all adept at video conferencing before COVID. Some of us tried to tell our new high-flyer manager that almost none of us were in the same city as him, and to be there on such short notice would mean travel expenses, meal allowances, overtime, etc. He didn't seem to care and told us in no uncertain terms to just be at the head office tomorrow at 8 a.m. before abruptly hanging up. No, I should explain something. I'm one of a handful of union delegates in our department. I know our award back to front, specifically the sections dealing with travel, allowances, and overtime, so I engaged in malicious compliance mode. If Steve wanted us there, fine, but it'll cost him. So I quickly went about emailing my team what Steve had done by requiring us to be in the head office at 8 a.m. and what to do. Because we'd have to travel outside our normal work hours, our workday clock started ticking the moment we left our homes and only stopped once we got home. Some of our team traveled overnight. They were entitled to overtime to travel, a dinner allowance, and accommodations for the night, and the same returning. As someone traveling in the morning before 7 a.m., I was entitled to a breakfast allowance, lunch allowance, and if I got home after 9 p.m., a dinner allowance also. So I left my house at 5 a.m. to catch the only train that would get me there in time. The train was running slightly behind, but I made it in time. So my first 3 hours of my workday went down and I'd done no work. After a brief period of us introducing ourselves to Steve, he proceeded to spend the next 4 hours telling us about all of the things he did at the bank, how he made so much money for them, where they'd sent him as a holiday bonus, how we'd all stuck in the past in the public service, the work he's seen wasn't up to private sector standards, etc. He had all the cocksuredness of a finance bro who had always failed upwards because others had picked up his slack. By 3 p.m., my entire team was into overtime pay territory, and Steve was just warming up with his non-charm offensive. Another 3 hours go by with Steve verbally patting himself on the back, deeply in love hearing his own voice, but all I hear is cha-ching, cha-ching. Steve decided that 5 p.m. was a good time to finish up. He stopped mid-sentence, looked at his watch, and unceremoniously said, "That's all for today, go home now," and walked out. After I and a few others gave a few awkward shrugs to each other, we all packed up and started to make our separate ways home after doing no work all day. I myself got to the train station pretty quickly and saw a train was leaving soon that would get me home around 8 p.m., or I could catch the all stations train and get home closer to 9:30 p.m. You know what? No matter how fast I could run, I just couldn't catch that earlier train. Damn, I'd just have to catch that train at all stations and be on the clock for another hour and a half, plus have my dinner paid for. Such rotten luck. I submitted my claims the next day, 4.5 hours at double rate, my train tickets, my taxi fares to and from the train station, my breakfast, lunch, and dinner allowances. For me alone, it was close to a $500 expense claim. The rest of my team followed suit and ensured they claimed everything too. Steve tried to fight us for approval of the claims, but quickly learned that unlike in the world of banking, most public servants are union, and we'd raise hell if he denied our award-guaranteed allowances. His all-day Steve Fest symposium blew a good $6,000 hole in his budget. Needless to say, while Steve was our manager, he never required us to attend an in-person meeting again. Video conferencing was just fine. He only lasted 6 months before leaving for new opportunities. He just went back to his old job at the bank. Guess, he was the one who couldn't keep up. Ah, banks, known for their glorious success and never having to rely on government bailouts to get over the massive mistakes that they make, especially because of higher-ups who are making so much money for executives and stuff, and then not having money for people and screwing. Oh my God, seriously, look into all the ways that banks have just screwed up, and oh my God, it's even in just like the last 30 years, it is mind-boggling. And people like this who are just like, I'm the big dog in town, I'm gonna teach all of you how to really do business. It just reminds me of these guys on TikTok who are saying things like, it's easy to make $1 million. In fact, it's easier to make $1 million than it is to make $10,000. I sit on the toilet and I poop out $1 million bills because I'm magical. And I teach you all how if you give me a lot of money, please. Story 4. My idiot racist neighbors and the petty revenge before we moved. Someone in another sub suggested I post here. Hopefully my story belongs here. On mobile, so sorry for formatting. We once had neighbors that from the day we moved in absolutely hated us. We never even met them, but they made our lives hell in every way they could. We had moved to that area, putting my grad school and our big life plans on hold to look after my mother-in-law who had stage 4 cancer, so it was already a crappy reason to move and we hated the area. Rural California is very yee-haw in a bad way, if you know what I mean. The neighbors were garbage people and just awful to us. They never did anything illegal per se, but every petty thing you can think of to make our lives crappy, they did. For example, our water hose was on their lawn after I watered my roses by about 2 inches. It was coiled mostly on our side, but I wasn't done watering and just stepped into the house for a few minutes for a lunch break. While I was inside, they cut the 2 inches off it that was on their property and threw it in our yard, but left the rest of that hose that was on our side. Absurdly petty. They had never even met us or spoken to us. Finally, after about 2 years of this, I was talking with my neighbors across the street about it, and she told me they were treating us that way because they thought we were illegals. I'm Native American, and my spouse is Hispanic, but they thought we were both Mexican. I asked him why they thought we were from Mexico, and she said before we moved in, some of our forwarded mail accidentally ended up in their box, and it had your Mexican address on it. New Mexico! We are from New Mexico. These idiot racists thought we bought a home in an upscale neighborhood in coastal California with cash, and we came straight from Mexico to do it, so we must be part of a cartel and here illegally. They had concocted this whole Narcos scenario because my husband's last name is Lovato. It's not, but a similar old Hispanic name widely used. We are darker than they deemed appropriate. We bought our house with cash. We had sold our starter house we put years of backbreaking work into renovating and made a killing on it. And they didn't know New Mexico is an effing U.S. state. It was all so absurd. Don't worry, the story has a happy ending. When we moved out after my mother-in-law passed, I wrote them a long letter telling them how embarrassingly stupid they are. I'm Native, so I was sure to tell them they were the ones trespassing on my land, gained illegally by their government, and how they were giant a-holes for making what was already a hard time on my husband who was dealing with the slow death of his mother, a highly respected physician in the area, so yeah, not an illegal cartel member, an even worse time, and I hope they're proud of themselves. Then we stole their cat. About the cat. They neglected him and left him outside covered in fleas and fending for himself day and night in the terrible heat of summer without water and in the freezing cold of winter without shelter. The cat had already moved in with us because we actually cared for it and we took care of his medical needs. In my book, you treat your cat like crap and you didn't microchip him, he's mine. So, one good thing came from our time there and he's napping in the windowsill right now. We named him Flavio after Flavio Mendez Santiago, the famous Mexican cartel drug lord. F racists. You know, I was gonna start off by saying, wow, they're both racist and stupid, but, I mean, that's redundant, isn't it? Because if you're racist, you are just, by definition, being stupid. You are just being stupid. Don't be racist. It's gross. And New Mexico, how do you not know? How? Like, you have to have heard it mentioned in school at some point when people are listing states and they say New Mexico and you never thought to be just like, what happened to the old one? Oh my gosh. I can't stand people like this. I'm glad that you didn't steal their cat. You adopted an abused cat. And good for you for taking care of it. I'm very happy to hear that that cat is happy, and I hope that those miserable people choke on their own farts. Story 5. My cousin sends our family her child's Christmas list each year, and it's completely insane. Every November, I, 24 female, receive a dreaded text in our extended family group chat from my cousin, 35 female. The text includes a highly detailed Christmas list from her 5-year-old, who we'll call Penny. The items are always expensive, obscure, and very hard to find. Additionally, she expects us to reply with the item we have purchased, then sends back the updated list with that item checked off. Each year, there's exactly the number of items for people in the chat, and once people hurry to claim the cheapest ones, you're left with $100 to $300 items to choose from. My cousin's an only child, and her mom caters to this as well as her dad, but the rest of us are getting pretty sick of it. Last year, someone didn't follow the list and said they'd already bought something else in the group chat, and she responded that isn't what Penny wants this year, which made them feel guilty for not adhering to this insanity. Now, some story. Penny has autism and is nonverbal and the sweetest child ever. My cousin and her husband are good parents for the most part, but they're a little self-focused. For example, they're both collectors of things like manga and toys and lose their minds if Penny touches their things, and the home is full of their collections. They have an entire room dedicated to this, which they call the fun room, and their daughter isn't allowed in. Not so fun. Now here's the kicker. The items on the list are almost always part of a collection, either vintage, certain editions, this or that, and tons of Beanie Babies. They've started a toy collection to their own for Penny, but it's a lot of things I've never seen her enjoy or show much interest in. One year, the most excitement she showed was for the box, and she loves Disney movies and Paw Patrol, but never has she gotten gifts related to these things. Also, we suggested some gifts like a toy kitchen or something interactive and sensory, and they shut that down in favor of expensive Lego. Star Wars Lego? She's 5. I know damn well that's going straight to Daddy's fun room. This year I'm getting her an Ariel doll and matching dress. I'm stopping the madness. Good for you! That is absolutely unreasonable. And to have gifts that here's just the list, and if you didn't pick soon enough, you might have to buy her a $300 thing. No, I'm all for getting Penny some toys and stuff that she would like. But yeah, if the parents are like, no, she wants this big expensive Lego Star Wars set, and you know that's something that Dad's into, then that's just kind of lying and gross. And absolutely stop the madness. How are other people going along with this? I'm sorry, they don't get to write all these rules. Ugh, gross. No, they're using their daughter to get stuff, and I hate that. And just stop. People, stop. Stop doing that. And make a fun room that's fun for Penny. Damn it. Please leave your story in the comments. I would love to make a video on them in the future. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe.